Hi there. This session's about posting bills in Zoho Books. We're going to go into the documents section as well and how it can be used with Zoho Autoscan. Whether or not you're a Spondu client or just doing this yourself, I'm hoping this will be reasonably useful. To start off, obviously you need to have a Zoho Books account. Um, we've already got one up, set up. This is a trial account, um, but it has all the functionality that we need. Um, I think so. So bills start off in the purchases section. So the purchases section of Zoho Books can be found from the main dashboard. So we've got purchases. We've already done a video on vendors, so I suggest maybe watching that if you want to add vendors. However, you actually don't need to add a vendor before you actually post a bill. You can create the vendor as you're posting the bill, and we'll try and go through all of that as we start now. Okay, so an important thing to understand in Zoho Books is that they've got a concept of expenses, and then they've got a concept of bills. It's important to choose which plan you use with Zoho, because bills won't actually be available unless you're using the professional plan or above. Um, as as accountants, we kind of find bills reasonably mandatory for what we do. Um, Sole traders on maybe cash accounting rules with HMRC might be able to use the expenses module, but we find that most limited companies you're going to need to use the bills section. So we kind of push most people to use the professional plan. Um, so what is the difference? Bills are is a section where if you post bills into the accounting system, it's going to be sitting there as a bill awaiting payment. That bill will be sitting in will sit there until someone has gone into the banking module and actually paid it off via the bank statement. So what you're doing is essentially matching the bill against the bank statement, and at that point, it's been paid off. Um, the reason why the bills section is reasonably mandatory when we're using limited companies is because um, it's it uses obviously accrual accounting, i.e., when you account for the invoice when it's received, and you post the invoice based on the invoice date or when the work is incurred, as opposed to physically the payment of cash. So the bills section is pretty mandatory. The distinction between bills and expenses, however, is expenses kind of ignore um, the kind of outstanding principal concept. So it relates more to cash. So if you're posting an expense, it's going to be instantly affect your bank balance, right? So if you've got a bank statement, you're going to be matching the bank statement against an outstanding payment, i.e., an expense payment out the bank account, as opposed to matching against an outstanding bill. For the accountants and bookkeepers listening to this, is the bill section is the accounts payable part or the trade creditors aspects of the accounting system. So you would be, debiting an expense account on the P&L and crediting the liability account for accounts payable when you post the bill. And then when you subsequently go and pay it off, you're obviously, crediting bank and then debiting accounts payable to pay it off. Whereas expense misses accounts payable entirely. So the expense process is kind of, you're crediting bank and debiting the P&L immediately. So I think you can probably see that this is why we kind of, when we've got limited companies, we do try and push them down the route of the professional plan within Zoho, unless they're reasonably very small. Um, then then we do just use the expenses module within even like the Zoho Books free plan. Um, but at the end of the year, you've obviously got to post some journals and accrue some outstanding bills to make sure the accounts are correct for company's house. Um, I'll start with recording an expense first. So again, just to reiterate, this is available on the free and standard plan as it currently stands. Today is March 2022. They may change that. This is available on all plans, but the free and standard plan do have the expenses function. So to record an expense, I go into expenses. Then you'll see here I'm recording a date of which I've received the expense, and then I can start choosing the account code. So let's say this is a marketing expense. As I said at this point, we don't have to have previously created the vendor, but potentially I do need to add a new vendor. So down here, I would obviously enter the vendor details if I've not created the vendor before. But let's say for this example, this particular expense is from Amazon, so I'm just assigning it directly to Amazon. I can write some more detail. So let's say this is computer equipment. No, let's say this is Amazon Web Services or something. And I can write my additional detail. You don't need to do that, but sometimes you do want to do that. So let's say this Amazon Web Services expense is for £53. At this point, I then need to tell it which bank account it's come from. So just to be clear here, I'll show you another route in which to create expenses when you're not just creating it straight from the dashboard. But at this point in time, going back to the accountants and bookkeepers listening to this, Zoho, this transaction will be crediting the bank in the accounting system and debiting the P&L immediately. So it's not going to be touching accounts payable. So you're going to need to tell it what bank account this has been paid from. Could we even set up a bank account on here? I'm just going to use petty cash for this example here. And then we can create the expense. So we've just created that Amazon Web Services expense, and we created it manually. So we created it from the purchase section, and we just created it as an expense there. Obviously, because this is this doesn't kind of touch any section of the bills section, and it kind of impacts the bank account. So it's fundamentally a bank account transaction. You'll see in the petty cash account, because I used that particular account, but I could have used a bank account. It's going to be sitting there as an amount on that bank account. So the petty cash account is now sitting there as a negative in this particular example. I can open up this transaction here, and you'll see it's got a status of manually added. It's marketing, advertising and marketing. Don't know why Amazon Web Services would be advertising, but let's say it is. And then that's there. If you want more information on how to reconcile a bank account, we've got another video on that. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on that right now. The other way to post an expense, and this is actually probably the most common way you'd be posting an expense transaction, is if you're doing it directly from the dashboard. So let's say we've got a test bank account here. We're going to open it up, and our bank feeds are coming through from, I don't know, Monzo Bank or something like that. I've got 3 transactions here. If I wanted to post an expense transaction, I could go back and do exactly what I did previously from the purchases section. I then create the section, and it'll be sitting there as a manually added transaction. I can then sit there and match that transaction against the bank statement line, because this feed here is fundamentally the bank statement line. Alternatively, I can skip that step entirely, and with the expenses module, this tends to be the way you do it. Is you'd have a bank statement feed coming through from your bank. Let's say this is an insurance payment from a chap called Joseph or something like that. I'd be putting this to insurance, right? I don't even have an account code for insurance, so I'll just create one. So this is ready to go to insurance. For some reason, this insurance company is called Joseph. Uh, Joseph. I can obviously add more details, and I would suggest putting more details, but for purposes of this video, I'll leave that. So now this is ready to go. I can obviously add a receipt, or in the case of it might be an insurance premium document against this transaction. But just to reiterate, when I press this, this is going to be it's going to be crediting the bank account and debiting the P&L insurance. It's not going to be touching account payable. So that's disappeared from our bank reconciliation screen. And then when I look here, you'll see it's been there. The difference between this one, you'll notice, is the status to the other one we did. The Amazon Web Services one we did was £53, and it sat there with a status manually added, whereas this one has a status categorized. The reason why that's the case is this one has been matched against a bank statement line, or it's been categorized from a bank statement line, whereas previously the other one was a manually added transaction. So when you go into our bank reconciliation videos, that's going to become heavily relevant, because manually added transactions technically are kind of like fake bank transactions until you've uploaded them against a proper bank statement.